All right, we are at the top of the hour, so I think we are ready to get started. Q, you on the line?
I'm here.
Awesome. Well, let's get going then. Hello, I'm Sheldon. Welcome everybody to our Micro Focus webinar. This is retained archiving for email, social, and mobile for finance in particular. Again, my name is Sheldon Mills. I'm a field marketing manager here at Micro Focus, and I'm here with Q Mangus, a solution marketing manager here at Focus. And today we're going to have a Q&A session addressing several of the most frequent questions we get regarding best practices, archiving, and retain in specific, especially as they pertain to finance. So I'll be asking those questions, and Q will be answering them. We have a number of questions that topics we want to get through. But however, if you have questions that come up as we go through the webinar, those are the most important ones we want to address. So please put those in the Q&A panel or the chat panel in Q, and I will be sure to address those. And how you do that is just click on the chat or the QA icon. You can type those in. Q?
Great, everyone. We're happy you could be here. Hope you can benefit from the information we're going to be presenting. Once again, like Sheldon said, if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them as we go through. Feel free to put those in.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in then. So what is archiving, and how does that affect me, especially when specifically relating to finance?
So let's just start out a little bit with information archiving. I just wanted to touch on what information archiving is. So historically, and we're probably all aware of this on this call, historically archiving has been known as email archiving. And of course, it still is the case. And email archiving is basically you tie to your email system, you pull those messages over, you have a repository for your information. However, archiving has evolved to where now it's more than just about storing old emails. Archiving is about archiving and storing and retaining your email, of course, as well as other types of communication. For example, mobile communication and social media. Those type of communication need to be archived as well. And so what that means and why that affects you is that that evolution in archiving from being just what it was an email store that you threw in the corner and you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm compliant, I've got it over there, I've checked a checkbox, to now it's something where you make sure that everything's archived and it's a living and breathing type thing where you can easily access that archive. You can gain information, insights into what's going on in your business. You can be prepared for e-discovery. You can have oversight on communication. Archiving is now something that is much more business critical, and it's not just about regulation compliance, but it's also about having oversight, being able to manage your data. And so that's really what archiving is it's that information store for all electronic communication, and it needs to be able to be something where you can use that information and quickly and easily get to it.
So specifically to finance, what regulations would affect kind of the what and how of my organization and how we archive?
So that's good because as I stated, it's not just about regulation compliance to be able to archive. However, especially for those in finance, and that's what this webinar is for, you need to archive for regulation compliance, and it's more than just about email nowadays. So here's just a few of the regulations that you have to deal with. So yeah, I'm not going to go into every one of those, but just be aware that there's a number of them, and every one of these have different aspects of why you should be archiving different things. So as an example, the first one there shows that you must be maintaining a record of social media. The next one is about tweets and text messages. You need to be able to have the ability to retain and retrieve these messages. And so really the idea with everything here is that it outlines what you should be archiving, which is email, social media, and mobile, and then for how long. And so I would encourage you. I'll leave this slide up for a minute, but I'd encourage you to look at these, understand them, and then do some more research and just know that what these regulations state is that you need to be archiving and that you do, and that by archiving you can be in compliance with them, and you will avoid fines and sanctions, and in other words, you'll just be compliant. But these are the regulations you need to worry about.
So what should I guess we We recently were just at a FINRA event, and we get this question there. So, what as a financial institution, what do I need to be archiving?
So I like to show this slide when we talk about this. This was a it's probably been within the last couple of years. This survey was done showing that most organizations understand and are archiving email. And so that's an obvious one. However, you need to be archiving social media and text messages, mobile communication, as kind of these regulations state. And so that's really what needs to be done. You need to be archiving your email. So whatever email system you're using to be able to communicate, that needs to be archived. Any of your social media platforms that are used for your corporate communication, and then anything that's used for communicating with customers. So if you have employees that are using social media for customer engagement, customer communication, that needs to be archived. And then the same goes for mobile. Anything that's done on mobile devices that where official business is taking place, that needs to be archived. And as one of these regulations states here, it says you need to be able to retain and retrieve business communications, whether they're on a work issued or personal device. So that's one thing to remember. It doesn't matter how that communication is done, if it's done via email or if it's done via Facebook or it's done via text or mobile devices, you need to be able to archive it. And so any of those business communication needs to be archiving. So that includes email, social media, and mobile communication.
Let's see. So, uh, do you have any advice when it comes to archiving mobile devices, especially BYOD? Bringing your own device. It seems to be a lot more common.
Absolutely. And like we said, this is one thing on the FINRA regulation 1139 where it talks about you need to be able to retrieve, retain, and supervise business communications, whether they're on work issued or personal devices. That really has to do with mobile. And so you need to be able to realize and understand that you need that oversight on mobile communication. We know that everyone has a mobile device now, right? I'm overstating, but most people have mobile devices. They have smartphones, they have an iPhone, an Android, etc. And your company may have corporate issued devices, but I would imagine that most organizations today are having some sort of BYOD situation where employees are bringing their devices, you're giving them a stipend or some sort of reimbursement for that. And so my advice is that you need to be aware of the mobile devices that your employees are using. You need to have a policy that clearly defines what can and can't be used on mobile, and it needs to, of course, the communication on mobile devices need to be viewed the same as email or social media for archiving. And then you need oversight of those mobile communication. So that gets a little tricky when it comes to somebody bringing their own device. Obviously, with a corporate device, it's easy because you're just like, well, this is the company device. Here you go. We're going to archive everything on that. We're going to have oversight on that. When it's a personal device, basically the way you need to put it is the policy needs to dictate, okay, if you want access to our systems and you're going to communicate officially, we're going to need to archive that. Now, the way you can get around not having to archive all personal information is by having a dual persona. And I would suggest that for those of you who have that situation where you have a lot of employees bringing their own device, that you have a dual persona which separates business communication from personal communication. And I'll touch on more on that, on a solution that we provide to be able to do that. But that's really the advice I would give you, is have that policy, make sure you have oversight, and if you're dealing with BYOD, that you have that dual persona.
What about, let's jump into social media. What do you do about a company's social media account?
So that once again is really important, is you need to have oversight on corporate social. So you need to be able to archive everything that's been placed out on your corporate social account. Any employees that are using their social media for official business communication, that needs to be archived as well. Also, an important part of social media archiving and just your social media policy in general is that you need alerts. Because if you have people that are posting a question or putting personal identifiable info onto your social media accounts, you need to be alerted to that. And so you need to be able to have a solution to monitor your social media so that those kind of things will be can be notified to your administrator or other named users. And so that can help, prevent harassment, inappropriate content, insider trading, anything that could cause a problem, that could maybe cause a lawsuit, or even get you involved in some sort of audit. And of course, like I said with mobile, you need to make sure to have a social media policy. That policy needs to say what is and is not appropriate for social media, both in a personal and a business sense. But then the oversight is very important on social media as well.
Let's jump into retain now because it's usually most people are on this to know about. So, what does retain archive?
So yeah, let's touch on that. Really good. Retain is a unified archiving solution. So we talk about unified archiving because, or what that means is that Retain can archive multiple email systems, social media, and mobile simultaneously into one central archive. So if you're in a situation where your organization is running multiple email systems, which is pretty common, you can archive them in the same central archive. And Retain archives email for Exchange, Gmail, Office 365, GroupWise, IBM Notes, and Bloomberg Professional. And for Bloomberg Professional, it does the messaging there as well, and that's archived into Retain. It also does social media for Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google Plus, Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, Vimeo, and YouTube, and then mobile for iOS, Android, and BlackBerry. And what that does is Retain archives all of that into one central archive and provides you with search and e-discovery tools so you can quickly and easily get to that data. So this circle really explains quickly what Retain archives. It's those communications for email, mobile, and social into one central archive.
Let's see. So, how does retain work with email specific? Office 365, Exchange, Gmail, GroupWise, Bloomberg, right?
So what Retain does with email is it ties directly to the email system. So for your users, it's seamless, right? So it ties to Exchange, or it ties to Office 365, it ties to Gmail, it ties to GroupWise, IBM Notes, Bloomberg Professional. It ties directly to those systems, and it pulls down email, it pulls down appointments, files, attachments, all to do with email communication, and it puts that into that archive. And then you have tools to be able to search that, to be able to perform e-discovery, to be able to redact and export. All of that is in that same central Retain archive with mobile and social. And so also what's nice about the email part of Retain is that it replicates the folder structure. So when a user goes in and looks at their personal archive, they'll be able to see it will look familiar to them because it will replicate what they see in Outlook, for example. And then, of course, there's named users that can search the entire archive. That includes like an administrator, an auditor, or others as well. So here's a view as well. We make it easy for your users to access the archive. They can access it via a web UI, or they can access it via a plugin that can be placed into Outlook or GroupWise. And what they can do with that plugin, they just click that. It brings up a search window. They can search that archive. It makes it easy for them to find archive data and get to that archive. Here's a view as I talked about the web UI. As you can see, the folder structure is replicated so it looks familiar. A user can browse their personal archive, and then an administrator can search the entire archive and be able to get to that messaging really quickly. So that's kind of what it does for email. And particularly one thing that it does as well that I want to touch on is that by archiving your email and getting it off of your live system, and Retain can help you do that, it actually makes your email system run better. And so that's important too, because sometimes email systems can get bogged down with tons of email, right? And so by pulling it off into an archive, Retain supports single instance storage, so your storage is reduced. It's also compressed when it's archived in Retain. So it's off of your email system. Your email system is going to run better. It's over in Retain. So if you have an on-premise system, uh, it's going to be your storage footprint's going to be lower. If you have a cloud deployment of Retain, it's going to be in the cloud and off of your email system. So that's Retain for email in a nutshell.
So how does, let's see, how does mobile archiving work with Retain? And I guess, do you have an example of that?
So mobile works differently for depending on the device. For those who are using BlackBerry, it is a seamless experience, meaning Retain ties directly to the BlackBerry Enterprise service and pulls down the BlackBerry logs. And so it takes those logs and it converts them into a format that's usable. So it would archive phone call logs, text messages and multimedia messages, along with BBM and PIN messages from BlackBerry. For Android, what we do is we place an app onto the Android device and it pulls everything down. It will pull down all the phone call logs, text messages, and multimedia messages from that Android. So everything native to that. And then for iOS, what it will do is we actually have partnered with a company called CellTrust to where we can deploy an app that goes onto the phone. And with that app, you can communicate business communications. It's going to assign a separate phone number to that. So now you can call using that phone number that's solely for business, and you can text via that app that's for business. So for business communication, you can use the CellTrust app. And then what's great is that we tie to the CellTrust app to be able to archive that. And so now you have oversight of all your business communication on iOS. We don't touch anything on the native side of iOS, meaning like iMessage or those, or the native dialer. That's all locked down by Apple, but there is that other alternative by having that dual persona to be able to have personal stuff stay personal and business stuff be archived and have oversight. And that same CellTrust app can be used on Android if you're in a situation where people are bringing Android devices. And so really the use case for this is if you have corporate issued devices, you'd want to use the Retain for Android where it pulls everything down. Same thing for corporate issued BlackBerry. If you have BYOD, you need to use the dual persona. And that would be an example of where you would use that is if somebody is bringing their own device, they want to communicate using your systems, they want to use it for business communication, you'd want to have that dual persona and be able to have oversight.
So what? Let's jump into social media again. What does Retain do with social media?
So for social media, as I talked about, you want to make sure to have oversight on your official social media accounts and any accounts that are communicating in an official way. So obviously, if you have, like we have Micro Focus, a Twitter account for Micro Focus, we would archive that. A YouTube page, we'd do that as well to be able to go back and have oversight, be able to have a historical record as well. And so what Retain can do is it can capture the full resolution pictures, videos, GIFs, and other data formats, and it will pull that into Retain. You'll be able to see it in context. You'll be able to see the historical information, and you'll be able to search that as well and be able to place social media posts on litigation hold so they won't ever be deleted. You'll be able to find those posts from one central UI. Another thing, as I talked about earlier, Retain includes alerts for keywords, questions, and personal identifiable info. So if there is a question that's posted to your social media account, Retain is archiving it in near real time, and it's going to alert you and say, hey, this question is up there, you should probably go answer it. Or if it's a keyword that you don't want posted, you could go out there and quickly get rid of it. Another couple things to remember is you don't have to collect the login info to be able to archive social media accounts. What you simply do is there's a URL you would give someone. They have to be logged into their social media account. They'd click on that URL. It would then authenticate and ask for permission to be able to access that social media account. And then now what it's going to do is it's going to be able to pull all that down even if that person changes their login, their password or whatnot. So you don't have to collect the info, and then if the info changes, it'll still continue to archive. And it will archive everything, whether they post that on your network or off your network. And so here's an example of just some of the platforms once again, and then you can do a quick search of social and pull back that information. And so that's something to remember, is that any corporate social accounts need to be archived, and then any official business communication also does as well. And so what retain ties to those to be able to bring that into that archive and have oversight on that.
Awesome. So let's see. Let's go to e-discovery now, because that's huge, especially in finance. So how does Retain help with e-discovery?
Really good. So this is a big thing that makes Retain different than other archiving solutions, is that Retain has um, built-in e-discovery tools. So you don't have to have a separate solution to perform e-discovery of the archive. You don't have to um, have a have maybe even a third-party solution to do that. You have it built into Retain. So now you can search. There's a Google-like search of Retain, to be able to go back, and I'll show that. Let me actually show that really quick. So what happens is, as you start typing in, once you get to 3 letters, it's going to start to auto-suggest with information that's in the archive, and then it's going to highlight the terms that you're searching for. You can also narrow the scope. So if you only want to see email messages, you could. If you only want to see social media messages, you could do that as well. But when you pull it by default, it's going to bring everything across. So you can do one search of the entire archive from one location. So that is one of the powerful things of Retain. Furthermore, there's litigation hold, so you can place messages on hold so they're not deleted until that hold is gone. There's For compliance reasons, there is policy-based archiving, so the message will stay in the archive for as long as you specify, but then once it hits that time limit, it's going to automatically drop off the archive, and you don't have to worry about it being there. Some other things, you have the ability to have an audit trail, so that anything that's accessed or searched and retained is logged, so you can go back and see that. And then there's permissions, so that you could give different users different rights. So the end users can access their own personal archive, and then an administrator can access the entire archive. Other named users can access different portions, and you can grant rights to them. So that's some of the things that Retain can do for e-discovery. Also, one thing to remember is that Retain has redaction built in. Some other archiving solutions don't. And so if you export something to a PDF, or you export and get something ready for an audit or for litigation, you can redact information that does not need to be part of the public record. And that's a built-in tool in Retain. So that there, once again, is just that view of the search, and just know that we make it an easy search. You can place those holds. You can export to PDF or PST, or what we have is a standalone archive viewer to be able to perform that redaction and be prepared for litigation or an audit. And you can quickly and easily get to that data too.
So let's get to the nuts and bolts. What makes Retain different from other archiving solutions?
So I touched on that a little bit, like the e-discovery tools being built in makes it different. Some other things too is the ability to have different options for the cloud. So depending on what you need, we offer a private cloud that's hosted in our data centers. It's something that can be done in the public cloud via AWS or through a partner cloud. So just depending on what you need, you can archive that in the cloud. And then of course for finance, we have the ability to have worm storage to make sure you're compliant there. We have the ability to make sure that you know where your data is and that it doesn't touch anyone else's data. So that's really important to remember. Another thing is that we make it easy for you to access, search, and perform e-discovery of the archive. So you can quickly and easily get to the archive via the web interface, and I showed that. An email plugin, we talked about that. There's also a mobile app for you to access that archive. And then there's an offline or standalone archive viewer. And what that does is that you can export information out of the archive, put it into this standalone archive viewer, and then it's standalone. So it can be placed onto a portable media like a jump drive or a DVD or even Dropbox and handed to another team, and then they can search that archive without having to access the full archive. I talked about the built-in e-discovery tools. Some other things, there's tagging. So there's smart tagging, confidential, and rule-based tagging. So you can tag any messages as they're being archived or in the archive to be able to go back and search those tags, be able to mark them as confidential, so you can quickly and easily get back to that information. One other thing is we have intelligent archiving. So as I touched on this a little bit, but it ties directly with Exchange, and it uses the Microsoft Recoverable Items folder or journaling to be able to make sure that you pull everything over and that nothing is lost. And this works as well with other platforms as well. That it pulls everything across, and this is important to make sure that nothing is lost and all data stays secure in that central archive. So that's some of the things that makes Retain different. I would encourage you to learn more about it and check it out, but just know that we make it easy for you to access that archive, and we include these features that make it unique.
Awesome. So lastly, and we get this a lot. So what's my next step? What do I need to do now?
Oh, and I had some screenshots just about that. Here's the flexible archive access. Here's that unified archive that I talked about. Here's that app. I realized I forgot to advance my slides. So here's that app where the mobile app. Here's the standalone archive viewer. So yeah, just want to show those really quick. And then yes, your next steps. I would go out and give it a try, right? Go get a personalized demo or a price quote. Visit retainarchiving.com to do that. From there, you'll be able to see, more information about Retain. You'll be able to see how it can apply to you, and then you can also schedule a time to see how how it could work for your organization, or maybe even see what the cost is. I would also suggest that you go out to our blog, blog.microfocus.com. From there, you can click on the section on information archiving, and it's going to bring up some blogs about information archiving. Two in particular that I would highlight would be this clarification on ghost apps, and we wrote a blog post about that from FINRA specifically. And then we also have a blog post about there about worm compliance. So these are our two latest blogs. Check them out. It gives some great information for you about that, and it will give you more information about how Retain can help in particular with those situations. So yes, next steps: get a demo, get a price quote, read these blogs. And yeah, we'd love to win your business. We know that Retain is a solution that could work really well for you. It's a cost-effective solution, and it will help you maintain compliance and have oversight of of all of your electronic communication.
And thank you for participating today.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.